My name is Zoe. I am 29 years old, and I live alone in a two-bedroom apartment that I chose myself, furnished myself, and pay for myself. The bedroom window faces east, which means I wake up to sunlight every morning. That sounds like a small thing. It isn't. I know the exact moment my family stopped being my family and became something I was surviving. It didn't happen with a fight. It didn't happen with a slammed door or a screaming match in the kitchen. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in October, when my brother walked through the front door holding a thick manila envelope, and my mother made a sound I had never heard her make before. It was a sound like relief, like she had been holding her breath for years and could finally exhale. The envelope held his acceptance letter to grad school. She cried. My father shook his hand like he was sealing a business deal. They opened a bottle of wine they'd been saving. My sister-in-law, who had only been in the family for 2 years, cried too. The dog barked. It was a whole event. I had passed my CPA exam 6 months earlier. I remember coming home that evening, setting the results printout on the kitchen counter, and my mother glancing at it while stirring soup. That's the accounting thing? She asked. Yes, I said. Good, she said. And she kept stirring. I told myself she was tired. I told myself a lot of things. Before I tell you what happened at Thanksgiving, subscribe and leave a comment. Where are you watching from? I need you to understand something. The pattern wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It crept. My brother is 4 years older than me, and growing up, our house had an invisible rule that nobody wrote down but everyone followed. His needs were urgent. Mine were optional. When he was 15 and I was 11, he went through what my parents called a rough patch. He stopped doing homework. He talked back. He punched a hole in his bedroom wall once, and my mother spent 2 weeks walking on eggshells trying to understand what he was going through. They took him to a therapist. They drove 40 minutes each way, twice a week. They cleared their schedules. They were worried about him. That same month, I had a teacher who was failing me on essays I wrote well. I was 11. I didn't know how to advocate for myself. I asked my mother if she could come to school to talk to her. My mother said she would try. She never came. I figured it out on my own. I always figured it out on my own. That became the shape of our family. He was the weather. I was the person who learned to dress for whatever storm he brought. He wasn't mean to me. I want to be clear about that. He wasn't cruel or unkind. He was just the center of gravity in that house, and I was orbiting at a distance so consistent they stopped noticing I was there at all. He dropped out of college after 2 semesters, and my father spent a year driving him to community college, then a second year paying for online courses, then a third year funding a business idea that went nowhere. When he finally re-enrolled at a state school at 24, my parents threw a dinner. My mom made his favorite meal. My dad gave a toast. I graduated summa cum laude at 22. My parents came to the ceremony. My mother took pictures. My father said he was proud. On the drive home, they talked about my brother's new apartment and whether the landlord was trustworthy. I started working at an accounting firm straight out of college. Entry-level, grinding hours, but I was good at it and I knew I was good at it. I moved back home for a year to save money. I told myself it would be temporary. I paid for my own groceries. I cleaned the kitchen. I was quiet. I asked for nothing. They charged me nothing for rent, and I told myself that was generosity. I didn't understand until much later that they weren't being generous. They just hadn't thought about it yet. The year my brother got into grad school, I got promoted. I was 28. The title was senior associate, which doesn't sound like much until you understand that my firm had promoted exactly one person at my age in the last 5 years. My boss called me into her office on a Wednesday morning and slid a letter across the desk. My hands were steady when I picked it up. I read it. I said thank you. I drove home that evening thinking about how to tell my family. I sat down at dinner. My brother was visiting. His wife was there. My parents were there. I waited for a lull in the conversation. I got promoted today, I said. Senior associate. My mother looked up. That's wonderful, honey. Then she turned to my brother. Did you hear back about the stipend yet? He hadn't. He talked about the stipend for 11 minutes. I counted because I had nothing else to do. I told myself it didn't matter. I was used to swallowing the feeling. I'd been doing it since I was 11 years old, sitting across from a teacher who was grading me wrong, while my mother drove 40 minutes to help my brother process his emotions. 3 weeks later was Thanksgiving. My parents always did Thanksgiving big. My mother started planning in September. The house would be decorated by early November, and for the 2 weeks before the holiday, it smelled like cinnamon and anticipation. Extended family came. Aunts, cousins, my grandmother when she was still alive. It was the one occasion my mother truly excelled at, and she knew it, and she owned it. This year felt different from the moment I arrived home the Wednesday before. There was a hum to the house, a specific kind of electricity I recognized but couldn't place. My parents were moving around each other with shared purpose. My mother was in a good mood, almost giddy. My father kept disappearing into the garage and coming back brushing his hands off on his jeans. "What's going on?" I asked my mother Wednesday evening when I found her organizing a drawer in the living room that didn't need organizing. "Nothing," she said, "just excited for tomorrow." She wasn't looking at me when she said it. That night, I lay in my old bedroom staring at the ceiling. The wallpaper was the same pink floral pattern from when I was 12. I had asked to repaint it twice over the years. We never got around to it too. My brother's old room had been repainted twice. It was now a home office. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself families are complicated, and I was reading too much into ordinary things. I fell asleep listening to my mother and father talking in low voices in the hallway. Thanksgiving morning was chaos the way it always was. My aunt and her family arrived at noon. My cousin and her husband came at 1. By 2 o'clock, the house was full and loud and warm from the oven, and I fell into the old grooves, setting the table, refilling drinks, keeping things moving. Nobody asked me to do it, I just did it because it was what I had always done, and stopping felt like dropping a ball I'd been juggling since childhood. My brother and his wife arrived at 2:30, and the energy in the room shifted the way it always did when he walked in. He had that quality. Rooms rearranged themselves around him. He hugged my mother for a long time. My father clapped him on the shoulder 3 times. Dinner was at 4, my grandmother's china, my mother's stuffing that everyone requested, my father at the head of the table, comfortable and ceremonial. Halfway through dinner, my father tapped his fork against his glass. The table quieted. "I want to say something," he said. He looked at my brother. He talked about resilience. He talked about hard roads and second chances and what it means to finally find your direction. He talked about how proud he was. His voice got thick near the end. My mother was nodding. My aunt wiped her eye. Then my father reached under the table. He brought up a card and slid it across to my brother. My brother opened it. Inside was a check. I didn't see the number, but I saw my brother's face when he read it. He looked stunned. He looked grateful. He looked the way people look when they receive something they've been hoping for without admitting it. "For school," my father said. "For the first year. We want you to focus." My brother stood up and hugged my father for a long time. I sat very still. I was holding my fork. I put it down carefully so it wouldn't make a sound. I looked around the table at everyone watching this moment, and I thought I paid for every year of my education myself. I applied for every scholarship. I worked the library desk and a tutoring center simultaneously for 3.5 years. I graduated with honors and no debt because I'd engineered it that way, alone, without asking for anything, because asking had never seemed like something I was allowed to do. I thought about the conversation I would have had with myself at 22 if someone had handed me a check. I thought about what I could have done differently, how much less afraid I would have been those first years, how many fewer times I would have lain awake doing math on my phone at midnight. I looked at my father. He was smiling at my brother. He didn't look at me. Then he did. The smile didn't change exactly, but something shifted behind his eyes, a flicker of something I can only describe as acknowledgement, like he knew I was watching, like he had decided at some earlier point that this was a choice he was prepared to defend. He reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and set it on the table in front of me. He did it quietly. He did it the way you'd slide someone a note in a meeting. I looked down at it. It was a typed list. At the top, shared household expenses, Zoe's portion. Below that, line by line, utilities, groceries, internet, property tax contribution, household maintenance. At the bottom, A total, $1,100 a month. Starting December 1st, I read it twice. I read it a third time. I looked up at my father. He was cutting his turkey. "You have a good salary now," he said, without looking at me. "It's time you contributed." He said it the way you'd say, "pass the salt." Like it was a thing that had already been decided. I looked at my brother across the table. He was looking at his check. He was not looking at me. I looked at the list in my hands and at the check in my brother's hands, and I understood, in a way that was cellular and complete, that this was not an accident, this was not a thoughtless oversight. This was a deliberate arrangement in which one child was an investment and one child was a utility. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I picked my fork back up. I ate the rest of my dinner. I helped clear the table. I washed the dishes. I dried them. I put them away. I did not speak for the rest of the evening unless spoken to. When everyone left and the house was quiet and my parents had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table by myself in the dark for a long time. I thought about what I had. I had savings, real savings, because I had been afraid not to save, because the ground had never felt fully solid beneath me. I had a good salary. I had no debt. I had references and skills and a title that had taken 6 years to earn. I had everything I needed. I went upstairs. I did not pack dramatically. I got out my large suitcase and one duffel bag and I packed systematically, the way I did everything methodically, without waste. Clothes, work things, the few personal items that actually meant something to me. My grandmother's ring, a book I'd been meaning to finish, my external hard drive. I left the floral wallpaper. I left the school photos on the shelf. I left the participation trophies from childhood sports that my mother had arranged in a row, my brother's in the center, mine on the end. I left the version of me that had spent 20 years arranging herself around everyone else's needs. I took the piece of paper from my pocket and set it on my pillow. Then I took a pen and wrote on the back of it, in small, even letters, "I won't be contributing. I'm moving out. I'll be fine. I've been practicing for a long time. Don't call me at work. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." I signed it with my name. I carried my bags downstairs. The house was dark and asleep. I knew which stairs creaked. I had always known. I had learned to move through this house without disturbing it, without taking up too much space, without waking anyone. I was very good at it. I had been practicing since I was 11 years old. I went out the front door and put my bags in my car. I started the engine. It turned over on the first try. I drove. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I had a number in my head, a hotel I'd stayed at once for a work conference, clean and close to the city. I drove there on automatic. I checked in. The woman at the desk didn't ask why I had a suitcase on Thanksgiving night, which I appreciated. I went to my room, put the chain on the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone started at 11:45. "Mom." I watched the screen light up, then again, "Dad." I turned the phone face down on the nightstand and I sat in the dark and breathed. The texts came in clusters. My mother first, "Where are you? Your bags are gone. What is this?" Then my father, "This is an overreaction. You need to come home and talk about this like an adult." Then my brother, which surprised me. My brother who almost never inserted himself into anything, "Zoe. Mom is really upset. What's going on?" I noticed as I read them, what they were not saying. They were not asking if I was okay. They were not saying, "We're worried about you." My father called it an overreaction. My mother was upset about her own feelings. My brother was managing my mother's distress, which was the thing he had always been allowed to opt out of while I absorbed it. I sent one text to the group, "I'm safe. I've moved out. Please give me space. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Then I put the phone down and I cried. Not because I wanted to go back. I cried because I was grieving the family that had never quite existed, the one where a daughter's accomplishments were worth a dinner, where hard work was a reason to be supported rather than a reason to be billed, where love wasn't rationed by gender or ease or some invisible calculus I had never been given the formula for. I cried for a while, then I stopped. I got under the covers in my work clothes and I slept for 7 hours straight, which was more than I had slept in a single stretch in longer than I could remember. I found an apartment in 11 days. It was not perfect. Second floor of an older building. One window in the living room faced a parking structure. But the building had a gym, and the lease was straightforward, and the landlord answered my questions with actual answers. I signed on a Friday. I picked up the keys on Saturday morning. They were two plain brass keys on a split ring. I held them in my palm for a moment before I put them in my pocket. I bought an air mattress. I bought groceries. I ate cereal for dinner the first night, sitting on the floor of an empty apartment, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. Not happy, exactly. Quieter than happy. Still, the noise from my family increased before it decreased. My mother called my cell from numbers I didn't recognize twice. I didn't answer. She texted my college roommate, who texted me a screenshot with a note that just said, "Heads up." My father sent an email, a formal, bullet-pointed email, laying out the mutual benefits of my returning home and suggesting I had made a reactive decision. I read it twice. I saved it to a folder on my laptop labeled Reference. My brother was the one who found a way through. He texted me from his own number 3 weeks after I left, not demanding, just, "Hey, can we talk?" Not about them. "I just want to know you're okay." I thought about it for 2 days. Then I said yes. We met at a coffee shop near my office on a Saturday morning. He was already there when I arrived, sitting with his hands around a mug, looking less assembled than usual. The confident, slightly careless ease he moved through the world with was quieter. He looked like someone who'd been thinking hard. "You look good," he said. "I sleep now," I said. He almost smiled, then he looked at his coffee. "I didn't know he was gonna do that. The list. I want you to know I didn't know." I believed him. Not because he was incapable of knowing, but because the thing about being the favored one is that you stop noticing the arrangement. It just feels like normal. It is normal to you because it's all you've ever seen. "The check," I said, not accusing, just naming it. "I know," he said. "I've been thinking about it." "It's not about the money," I said. "I've been thinking about it." "It's not about the money," I said. "I know," he said again. He finally looked at me. "It never was it?" "No." We sat with that for a moment. "They're struggling," he said, "without you there. Dad can't find anything. Mom doesn't know how the insurance portal works. The houses, it's a lot more work than they realized." "I know," I said. "Are you going to help them?" I looked at him steadily. "Are you?" He was quiet for a long time. "I could," he said slowly, like he was hearing the idea for the first time. "You could." I agreed. "Google is very thorough. YouTube has tutorials for literally everything." He made a sound that was almost a laugh. I didn't help him with whatever he was working through. I didn't offer solutions. I drank my coffee and I let him sit with the realization that the infrastructure he'd taken for granted had been a person, and that person had gotten tired. When I left, I hugged him briefly in the doorway. It was the most honest moment we'd had in years. 6 weeks after I moved out, my father showed up at my apartment. I didn't know how he found the address. Later, I found out he'd asked my cousin, who'd seen me post a neighborhood on social media. I made a note to be more careful. I heard the knock and knew before I looked. He knocked like a man who expected doors to open. I looked through the peephole. He was standing in the hallway in his winter coat, looking impatient and slightly damp. It was raining. I opened the door, but I stood in the frame. "How did you find me?" I asked. "That's not important," he said. "Can I come in?" I stepped back and let him enter. He walked into the apartment and looked around with the expression of a man who had already decided what he thought. The air mattress I was still using. The single lamp. The boxes I hadn't unpacked. He looked at all of it with something between contempt and satisfaction, like the austerity confirmed his belief that I had been foolish. "You made your point," he said. "Now come home." "I'm not making a point," I said. "I live here." He turned to look at me. "You live here," he repeated. The way he said it, it wasn't a question. It was a verdict. "Yes, on an air mattress. I ordered a bed frame. It arrives Thursday." He made a dismissive sound. Zoe. He said my name like a command. Your mother is falling apart. The house needs maintenance I don't have time for. Your brother is in school. I need you to stop this and come back. I looked at him. I felt very calm. The anger I might have expected wasn't there. It had been replaced by something cooler and more precise, like clarity. You handed me a bill, I said. That same night you handed him a check. That's not. On the same night, at the same table. He needs support right now. You're capable. You're established. So capable people don't deserve support. That's not what I said. Then what did you say? I asked. Tell me exactly what the logic is. Because I would genuinely like to understand it. He didn't answer. He looked at the wall behind me. Is it because he's your son? I asked. My voice was very even. Or is it because you've always seen me as the one who handles things, and it stopped occurring to you that the person handling things might need something too? He was quiet for a long time. You always were the capable one, he said finally. It wasn't an apology. It was almost defensive, like capability was a natural resource he'd been entitled to extract. Being capable doesn't mean I don't count, I said. It means I was better at hiding that I did. He looked at me then, really looked, the way he rarely had. I saw something move across his face. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was remorse or just the discomfort of being seen clearly by someone you've underestimated. I'm not coming back, I said. I held the door open. Not because I don't love you, but because the way you treated me told me what you thought I was worth, and I'm not able to unknow that. I need to be somewhere that doesn't confirm it every day. He stood there for another moment. Then he walked to the door. He paused at the threshold. Don't expect things to be easy from here on out, he said. It was the closest he came to a threat. Dad, I said, and my voice was tired and honest. Things have never been easy. I just made them look that way. He left. I closed the door, locked it, stood with my back against it for a moment. Then I ordered the bed frame in the size I wanted, and I sat on my air mattress and ate leftover pasta and watched something funny on my laptop, and the apartment felt very quiet and entirely mine. The weeks that followed were the most productive of my life. Something I hadn't realized. I had been spending enormous amounts of energy managing the emotional atmosphere of a home I didn't own, monitoring my mother's moods, preempting my father's frustrations, making myself small enough not to provoke and useful enough not to be resented. That energy, once freed, went somewhere. I took on a client project my senior colleagues had been avoiding, a complicated audit for a company going through a merger. It was the kind of work that required the specific combination of precision and persistence I had been developing my entire life. I finished it 2 weeks ahead of schedule. My boss used the word exceptional in a way that felt like she meant it. In January, she called me in and offered me a team lead position. More responsibility, more autonomy, a significant raise. Why me? I asked, because I was still learning that it was okay to ask. Because you don't panic, she said. And you don't make it personal. You just solve the problem. I thought about that on the drive home. I had spent so many years being told implicitly that my ability to absorb difficulty without complaint was just what I was supposed to do. It had never occurred to me that it was a skill, that it had value, that it was something I had built, painstakingly, over a very long time, and that it was mine. I bought a bed. I bought a couch. I bought plants, which I had always wanted and never had because my mother didn't like the mess of them. I learned that I am very good with plants. They're still alive. Some of them are thriving. I consider this a significant personal achievement. I talk to my brother. We have lunch every few weeks now. He is in the slow, slightly uncomfortable process of learning to do things himself. Cooking, logistics, advocating for his own needs. He got feedback at his graduate program that his writing needed work. He signed up for a workshop. He told me about it without prompting. That felt like something. My parents and I have an arrangement. We see each other on major holidays and sometimes in between. The dynamic has changed in ways that are hard to name. My father is less loud. My mother is less demanding. They treat me with a certain careful consideration that wasn't there before. Not warmth exactly, but something like respect. The kind of respect that happens when someone removes the rug you didn't know you were standing on. My mother called me last spring and asked how I was. Not because she needed something, just to ask. I told her I was doing well. I told her about the promotion. She said she was proud of me. I believed her, and I let it be complicated. Not everything, not enough to erase 20 years, but something. A small true thing. There is a folder on the shelf in my closet. Inside is the typed expense list my father handed me at the Thanksgiving table. I keep it, not because I am angry. The anger has metabolized into something more useful. I keep it because it was the moment I stopped waiting for permission. I had been waiting for some signal that I was allowed to want things, to need things, to take up space in the story of my own life. That list was the signal. It just said the opposite of what it meant to say. It told me I had to leave, and leaving saved me. If you're reading this because some version of this is your story, if you're the one who changes the tires in the rain and gets it that's nice, honey, when you tell them what you've accomplished, then hear this. You are not imagining it. The invisible labor is real. The differential is real. And the fact that you have learned to absorb it quietly does not mean you are built to carry it forever. Leaving is not a punishment you give your family. It is a gift you give yourself. It will be uncomfortable. It will be lonely in the beginning, in a way that has texture and weight. You will second-guess it at 2 a.m. when the apartment is quiet and your phone has a name on it that you're not answering. But then the morning comes, and the one after that. And slowly, without ceremony, you begin to build a life that has your name on it, your lease, your keys, your plants on the windowsill, your sleep, and you will realize that the quietest rooms are often the fullest ones. I've thought a lot about what that Thanksgiving dinner actually cost. Not the $1,100 on that typed list my father slid across the table. The real cost. The kind you don't notice until you're sitting alone in a quiet apartment, eating cereal off the floor of a life you're only just beginning to claim as your own. Here's what I know now. The way people treat you is information. That's it. It's not a verdict on your worth. It's information about what they value, what they're willing to see, and what it's convenient for them not to notice. My father looked at me, 6 years of grinding, a promotion that took talent and endurance, and a specific kind of refusal to quit, and his brain translated all of that into, she can handle more. He wasn't wrong that I could handle it. He was wrong that I could handle it. He was wrong about what it meant. Capability is not a reason to be overlooked. It is not a debt you owe the people who benefited from it. I spent a long time being the person who held things together and then felt quietly resentful that no one seemed to notice the holding. That resentment was information too. It was telling me that I had been waiting for acknowledgement, for fairness, for some moment where the invisible work would finally be seen and named. The problem with waiting for that is that you are placing your own self-worth in someone else's hands and handing it to people who have already demonstrated in 100 small ways that they aren't careful with it. What I did, leaving, signing my own lease, buying my own keys, that was not a punishment. I want to be clear about that. It was not revenge. It was cause and effect, plain and simple. You treat someone like a utility long enough. Eventually, they stop being available. You fund one child's future and bill the other for existing. Eventually, the billed one does the math. The math is not complicated. What changed after I left wasn't magic. It was friction. My family had been operating in a frictionless environment because I had been absorbing all the difficulty, smoothing, managing, anticipating. When I stopped, the friction returned to where it had always belonged. My brother had to learn things. My father had to reckon with logistics he had ignored for decades. My mother had to manage her own emotional life. These are not extraordinary burdens. They are ordinary adulthood. I just happened to be the one carrying them on everyone's behalf. The person I am now, the one with the team lead title and the east-facing window and the plants that are genuinely thriving. She was always there. She was just spending all her energy on other people's survival. The note I left on my pillow said less than I felt. I wanted to write 20 years of footnotes. Instead, I wrote 8 sentences. I think that was right. Some truths don't need a dissertation. They just need to be stated and then acted upon. If any part of this sounds like your life, I want you to hear this from someone who has been in that kitchen, absorbing that silence, telling herself it was fine. Your competence is not a reason to be taken for granted. Your steadiness is not a reason to be last. And the fact that you have survived difficult things does not mean you were built to survive them indefinitely, alone, without anyone asking how you're doing. You are allowed to leave rooms that diminish you. You are allowed to sign your own lease. You are allowed to buy the plants you always wanted and let them grow in the windowsill of a life you chose. I woke up this morning to sunlight on the east wall and I made my own coffee, and the apartment was completely quiet, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.